Folks, welcome to Beyond the Pitch. I'm Phil here in the city that never sleeps, in the city of lights, Las Vegas. Doing this from my hotel room. Joined here, as always, with the fantastic Danny Higginbotham, where we've got so much to talk about today. We want to talk about youth development. We want to talk about the FA Cup. We want to talk about a number of other things that we'll get into about weakened teams in the FA Cup. Danny, how's things, mate?
I'm very good, thanks. Yourself? You had a good weekend?
Yes, mate. Disappointing result about the fight, but must say it was a great event. Brilliant respect amongst the fans. Atmosphere was fantastic. So
two boxers really
it.
Respected each other as well, didn't they?
Yes, you know, I'm a lover of the sport, Danny. So it's good to see the respect between both sets of fans, both fighters. It doesn't always have to be where there's a lot of nonsense goes on. I think there has to be mutual respect between two athletes. And for me, the right guy won. Leo Santa Cruz, for me, deserved the result. But anyway, mate, so much to get through. Going to start in the FA Cup because the last time we did a show when we talked about the FA Cup, there wasn't any shocks. We were lamenting the fact that you weren't seeing a lot of giant killing. And then this round was a wee bit different. We saw Sutton overturning Leeds. We saw Liverpool get knocked out by Wolves. And largely as a result of teams leaving players out. Now, I can understand, maybe I can understand it, if you're a top team where you've got a heavy schedule, you've got Liverpool, or you've got European competition. But why are teams who don't play in Europe rotating in the FA Cup? When did it become okay to disrespect the FA Cup like this? You there, Don? I think it's frozen.
When I look at it, everybody's going on about the changes, in the FA Cup. You know, I think Leeds made 10, Liverpool made 9, Newcastle 9, Brighton 9, Watford 7, and Hull 7. That's not the issue to me. If you want to make changes, that's fine, but it's how you go about it, because Manchester United and Chelsea both got comfortably through. Chelsea made 9 changes and Manchester United made 7 changes, but the changes were senior professionals coming into the team. So if you look at Manchester United, Rocco came into the team, Rooney came into the team, Martial, Schweinsteiger, alongside Fosu Mensah. Chelsea, Terry came into the team, Fabregas, Willian, Begovic, alongside, obviously, Aku's been on loan at Bournemouth, Shalabar and Loftus-Cheek. So for me, that's not the major issue. It's the changes in terms of players that are coming in that haven't played for a long time, haven't got the experience. So that's, for me, what it comes down to. It's not the number of changes, but it's getting the blend right. It's getting the blend. If you're going to play youngsters, don't play too many youngsters. Have some senior players in there as well. And that, for me, is a big thing, more so than the numbers that are coming into the team is in terms of change. And that's what you've got to look at, because it's all well and good. Everybody wants to see youngsters promoted and coming into the team, but they have to have the experience and the seniority around them that can help them through the game.
But is there a part of us, Danny, that needs to be pragmatic and says, look, the game has evolved. I know whenever you and I were young, the FA Cup was really important to us. Now it seems like what gets prioritized is what makes money for clubs. The FA Cup's not a massive generator of cash for clubs unless you're a smaller club. But I get the feeling that the likes of Liverpool and these top teams look at the FA Cup and say, if we win it, great, but it's not going to take priority over the Premier League. And much the same thing has happened with the Europa League.
Yeah, I do agree with that, but I think the way you've got to look at it is, as you've just said, I think managers, instead of looking at the game straight in front of them and looking at the game after it. But I'll give you a prime example. It was something I did the Liverpool Wolves game on Saturday, and it was something that I talked about at the end of the game, which is Liverpool obviously made a whole host of changes. Their next game is at Anfield as well against Chelsea. But if you look at the players that are likely to come back into the team, so you're going to have your likes of Matip, Lovren, Lallana, Henderson, etc., are going to be coming back into the team for that game, against Chelsea. Football is very much a confidence-based game. Now, the players that I've just mentioned, the last time they stepped out at Anfield, they got knocked out of the League Cup. They got beat at home by Southampton. Whereas if they would have played against Wolves at the weekend, you get that winning feeling back, you get through to the next round of the FA Cup. The pressure then doesn't feel as intense because you've just got to win under your belt. Whereas, like I say, the majority of them players that are going to come back into the team on Tuesday against Chelsea, their last appearance was in the League Cup at home against Southampton, and they got knocked out of it. And what Liverpool are facing had a wonderful start to the season. Everybody was talking about them as title contenders, and rightly so. Their season could be over within 1 week. So you have the League Cup game, the FA Cup game. If they lose to Chelsea tomorrow, that's 13 points adrift of the title of Chelsea, who are top of the league. And that's a game over for them. So it's going to be another year without silverware. So that's the frustrating thing from Liverpool supporters. I think they look at it, a season that promised so much might end up with nothing.
But Danny, when I watched them at Old Trafford, they still look decent to me. It's really been since the turn of the year. Klopp hasn't bought in January. What is going wrong at Liverpool? What started this slide?
Right. If you look at, so they have, I think it might be 6 defeats now this season. So Bournemouth, Swansea, Southampton twice, Burnley, and Wolves. Okay, all 6 of them games they had at least 65-70% possession.
Yeah.
Now, Liverpool don't want possession. So that's why they struggle against the so-called lesser teams, against the performance against Manchester City at home that they won, and the 2 performances away at Chelsea and Arsenal. They had far less possession than Manchester City, than Arsenal, and then Chelsea. And that's when Liverpool are at their best, when they can counter-attack. But all the other teams that I've just mentioned, all the defeats that I've mentioned, in particular Wolves at the weekend, they had 79% possession, and they got picked off. Wolves did their homework. And for me, I look at it's something that we've mentioned before. I look at a manager like Jurgen Klopp. We know the way that he wants to play. He's 100 miles an hour. He wants to allow teams onto and then break quickly. Now, if teams start to suss you out and go, well, no, we're not going to allow you to do that. What teams will do, the deeper you defend, the more narrow you become. But Wolves, as like Swansea, as like Southampton, said to Liverpool, okay, we will vacate an area of the pitch. And that area is going to be the wide areas. So when you get into them wide areas, you're going to put crosses into the box. Not a problem at all. But if you're a centre-half, you're going to fancy yourselves against the likes of Firmino, against Lallana, against Coutinho, Origi, Sturridge. If you're a strong physical centre-back, you are going to fancy your chances to be able to deal with these crosses coming into the box. So that's where I think maybe Klopp would look at it, even now we're in the summer, and go, I need that physical player in my team. Not necessarily 6'5" or anything like that, but someone that's going to cause problems. Lewandowski, he's a player that causes problems in the box. He used to do that for Dortmund. And that's where I think Liverpool are probably missing out a little bit at the moment. I was fortunate enough to speak to Paul Lambert on the Thursday before the game, and because I'd worked with him a few times before, and he said while he was out of a job, he went over to Germany, and he knows the way that they play, he knows the way that Dortmund play, he knows Klopp's style. They went through their pro licenses together, and he said that he had a plan, and the plan was he had to disturb Liverpool, take them out of their comfort zone and take them into areas where they didn't want to go, which was in the wide areas and congest the middle of the field. And that's what teams have done against Liverpool. I've had success against them, and it's very much a case of not just Liverpool, but all the FA Cup games. So all your major shocks, the teams, the so-called bigger teams, had huge amount of possession, but it's easier to defend than it is to attack. So teams were allowing the opposition onto them, allowing them to have all the possession and then breaking quick. And that's something that Liverpool are really struggling with at the moment. And Liverpool, I feel, are a team that fantastic to watch when they're in full flow. But if they don't get an early goal, they struggle. So I think this season, 19 times they've scored in the first half, gone on to win 14 of them. There's been 12 times where they haven't scored in the first half, and they have won only 4 of them. So it's a massive thing for them.
So are you telling me that Liverpool have now been sussed out, Danny, and that if they've been sussed out, and you've been saying Paul Lambert went over to England or to Germany to see how Jurgen Klopp plays, this is his style.
Just in general, how German teams play, and a lot of teams want to play the gegenpress. A lot of teams want to do that. It's just that Klopp was very good at it at Dortmund with it, and he brought it over to Liverpool.
I'm gonna move so I can get some light. So here's the thing, Danny. If he's been found out in the major playing style that you identify with Jurgen Klopp, how does he now change Liverpool sufficiently to where he's not going to get found out. He's going to have to completely change the way Liverpool play. Otherwise, teams will now know exactly how to play against them. Because if you look at the teams that they've lost to, if you look at they're not losing to top teams, Danny.
See, that's the difference. When they play against the top teams, they have less possession, and that suits Liverpool far better. To have less possession, they want less possession, because the less possession that you have in a game, the more you can counter-attack. And that's what Liverpool want. Now, Jurgen Klopp, I'm not saying that the way he plays has been completely sussed out. He can still play the system that he wants to play, the 4-3-3, but what he may need is different plays in different areas. So what he might need is a more physical centre forward at times if teams are going to come and sit off. You know, that's what I'm saying. I don't necessarily think that it's a case of having to change the system that he plays. For me, it's more a case of him maybe having to bring different players into that system that he plays, that allows them to do more things, that allows them to use the wide areas more to their benefit, to get more crosses into the box, because teams will look so frustrating, and that means sitting deep. So you can have pace, but pace becomes... It's pointless having pace sometimes with the way that teams are setting up against Liverpool, because there's no space in behind. So it might be runners from midfield. And like I say, the wide areas, which teams are going to give you then in the area then to get the balls into the box. So that might just be the little alterations that Jurgen Klopp has to make along the way.
So if he doesn't get a physical striker in the last day or two of the window, what do you predict lies ahead for Liverpool for the next 4 or 5 months?
I think it's going to be a scrap for top four. I really do. I think that Liverpool will, in my opinion, Liverpool will probably continue to get very favourable results against the top 4 to 6 teams. They're not the results that will let them down. The results that will let them down will be your Bournemouths, your Burnleys, your Swanseas. Teams like that, they're the results that will, at the end of the season, will have disappointed them and contributed to them probably not winning the Premier League. Whereas you look at Chelsea, well against the big teams, but they also do very well against the so-called lesser teams. You know, you look at their defeats this season. Their defeats this season have been against Liverpool before they changed their system, have been against Tottenham recently, have been against Arsenal.
Did I lose you, Danny? Sorry, I'm doing this in the hotel room and it's not the best.
It's actually getting the results against the so-called lesser teams, because their results against the teams around them have been good.
So, okay. You know? So, yeah. Can you hear me all right, by the way? Did I lose you?
Yeah, just a little bit, just breaking up a little bit, but not too bad, mate.
Okay, you're back here. Sorry, mate. I don't know if it's on my end or yours. It's probably on my end. Trying to do this in a hotel room. Donny, another thing that came up this week was young players leaving Premier League clubs. Sean Goss, for example, went to QPR. You yourself found yourself in a very similar situation where a young player finds himself at a point where you're at a club too long, you need to move. Describe to me about that process for a young player, about when you get to a point where you're like, I want to play at a big club, but it's time for me to move on and join somebody else. You found yourself in that situation.
Football, Phil, in my opinion, everything to do with football, it's all about timing, whether it be in the right place at the right time, giving a good performance at the right time to get that opportunity in the first team or to get that move. And I just feel that I noticed that at my time growing up at Manchester United, there was players playing in the reserves at the age of 23, 24. And the problem is with that is that you're no longer seen as a young prospect that a Premier League team may want, a Championship team may want. So it becomes very difficult, but there is still a real attraction, I think, for some players to say, I'm still a Manchester United player, I'm still a Chelsea player, a Manchester City player. And you have to decide when the time is right, because before you know it, if you outstay your welcome at a big club, your career may actually be over before it's begun, or you may have to drop very, very low. I'd signed a new 4-year contract. I had 3 years left. And Sir Alex Ferguson rang me up one day out of the blue in the summer. And he said to me that Derby County had come in and had made a bid for me, and did accepted the bid. And my mind was made up straight away, because I feel that Sir Alex Ferguson, if he wanted me to stay at the football club, he would have said that, listen, we've had this offer from Derby County, but you're progressing well, we want to keep you here. Or he wouldn't have told me. And in that situation, it becomes sink or swim. You know, you've got to go out and you've got to then go and make the career for yourself. Because it's easy to be at a big football club when you're not playing and you just sat around if you want to take the money and things like that, which unfortunately can be the undoing of a lot of youngsters' careers. But, you know, at a time you have to go out there and then go and make that own name for yourself instead of just being associated with a football club that you and me are as close to playing for that first team as they are, because they're miles away. And it's a big decision to make. You know, you imagine Phil, you're at a huge football club. You're at Manchester United, the team that you support, that you love. And you've been there for 10, 11 years. And all of a sudden, the time comes where you have to move on. There's going to be an emotional attachment for you. But you have to put that to the side, and you've got to think with your head instead of thinking with your heart, because you've still got 12, 13, 14 years left of your career. So you have to go and try and make that reputation for yourself away from that football club. And for me, people asked me at the time, was it a difficult decision? It wasn't, because A, I wasn't good enough for Manchester United, and B, it was time for me to move on, and it was the right thing, and I stand by it 100% what I did. But I just think there's lads that have that opportunity at 21, don't take it, and then 23, 24 comes along, the career's over before it's begun. And it's a real shame, because I think a lot of youngsters are doing that now, especially with how much money is around at the big football clubs.
Yeah, one of the things that I see, Danny, at this age group is I see 19, 20, 21-year-olds from Spain, from Italy, from Germany, France, all playing for English clubs. They had no problems leaving their respective clubs to go abroad and play for clubs. I don't see that with English kids. Why aren't English kids saying themselves, even if you're at a Manchester United or whatever it is, do you know what? Instead of sitting in United's reserves or Arsenal's reserves or Chelsea's or whatever, I'm going to go and cast my net beyond England and look at playing in foreign leagues. Why aren't young English players developing their game and moving abroad? I mean, Danny, I know that there's more and more money in the Premier League now, but maybe the last really, really good England team was in 1990. And if you look at that team, Danny, it had 4 or 5 players that had either played abroad or were currently playing abroad. You had Gaza that was about to go to Lazio. You had Lineker that just came back from Barcelona. You had Chris Waddle that had been at Marseille when Marseille were a top club. You had Trevor Steven that was at Marseille that was a top club. You had Des Walker about to go to Sampdoria. Are English players suffering? Yeah, Platt was away to Sampdoria when that was the best league in the world. Why are English players not willing to take the risk and go abroad to foreign clubs?
Right. So the two main players that we probably mentioned, you can tell me if there's more, are probably from recent years that have come from Spanish clubs to English clubs at a young age. Fabregas, Piqué, correct? 2
of them, yeah.
Yeah, they would probably be the main 2 that you would mention. I guarantee 100% Fabregas going to Arsenal would have had a huge increase in his wages. Piqué going to Manchester United probably would have had a huge increase in his wages.
Of course.
Okay? The difference is, that's the problem. You take young players in England who are paid, why would they go and take that risk and go abroad, which should be fantastic for them? Why would they go abroad and take a pay cut? That's the big issue that we have, because the generation now, more than ever, is driven by money.
Okay, and that's the point that needs to be. Look, we've had this conversation before about young players. When they get a contract at 18, 19, that's probably the most money that most of them will ever make in their career. Yeah. So we need to change. Go ahead.
Your development, for me, your key area of development is probably from the age of 18 to 22. Now, if you sign a huge contract at 17, which puts you on big money until 22, and you are driven by money, and you go, okay, that's great, you're not progressing. You're probably going to be the same player at 18 as you are at 22. Now, you look at the players coming into the Premier League that have been successful. Dele Alli came from MK Dons. You have a little bit older, Vardy come through the lower leagues. Charlie Austin came through the lower leagues. The list will go on, I'm sure. Chris Smalling came from non-league. Jagielka, okay, one of the older ones, came from Sheffield United in the lower leagues. Walker was at Leeds, if I remember right. Rose was also at Leeds, if I remember right. James Milner at Leeds United. The majority of players that come through and go and be successful at Premier League clubs have actually come from a football club that is lower they've not had someone say, here you go, you're playing in the reserves, but I'm going to give you X amount of money. So therefore, when they get to the Premier League, they appreciate more than anybody else. Is a key, is that too much too soon is actually destroying a lot of youngsters' careers before it's actually begun.
All right, so you have a situation, Danny, where instead of being advised properly, so why aren't people who surrounding these players advising them and saying, look, you can sit here for the next 2-3 years, and yes, you're going to make more money, but at a key point in your career, you're not going to play football. If you take a pay cut right now and go to Germany, go to France, go to wherever, and get regular playing football time for the next 2 to 3 years, what it will do for your career, because you're going to come back to England in a couple of years, a fully developed player, rather than drifting out of the game in 2 to 3 years. Why aren't people advising these kids and saying, look, if you don't do this, the probability that you're going to drift out of the game is much higher. It seems to me, Danny, that young English players aren't willing to take the same risks that foreign players are willing to take. And yes, of course, PK and Fabregas would have got more money. England have exploited the employment laws, where in Spain you can't offer someone a contract till they're 18. English football got those kids at 16, where in English employment law you can offer them a contract. And yes, we all know money's important, but Danny, surely English kids have to take the long ball. A whole different view to this.
I think more often than not, people are going for the security instead of taking that risk. And there probably are a few agents that are saying to the players, listen, there's no need for you to sign it. Go, spread your wings and go and see what else is available. But a lot of players, if they've been at a football club for so long and someone says, right, here's a 4-year contract on, I don't know, 15,000-20,000 pounds, they're going to take it because it's short term. But the problem is they don't realise that that's probably going to be their biggest contract, and it's 4 years.
Yeah.
And then after that, you're going to be taking quite a few steps back. Unfortunately, that is the way it is. And until the rules change for English football clubs, which I can't see how it's going to be possible for them to change, then it becomes a real issue. And it's something that players are stagnating because of it. You only have to look at England under 21s. Okay, they won the recent tournament in the summer, but it's nothing major. But if you look at the Euros for them, they flattered the seed. They probably won in the last 3 or 4 Euros. They probably won about 3 games, and it shouldn't be acceptable for some of the players that they've got. But players are now stagnating. That's why you are getting the last Euros. I think England had the most combined under 21 caps, but the least combined first team appearances. Because it's not a conveyor belt. You look at Portugal, you look at the players that were playing for Portugal, your likes of Silva, they had actually come back from a major tournament with Portugal to come and play for the under-21s. Juan Mata did it a few years ago. De Gea did it a few years ago. Martinez for Spain, I think they just won the World Cup or something along them lines. They went and played for the under-21s. And that's a real issue that I think we have at this football club, is that everybody progresses really well, but then they get to that under-21s and it halts. And there's no real progression, and you're finding players getting 35, 40 caps for the under-21s. So there's no natural progression then into first team. That's why the national team isn't successful. You look at everyone's talking about Belgium now, the fact that they should be doing more than what they're doing with the players they've got. You look at the glory years with Spain. You look at the glory years with Germany. Look at the players in that national team, all much of the age groups together, all developed together. And that's the big difference. Whereas England, it's very rare that you're seeing players coming through at the same time, playing for the 16s, the 18s, the 21s, and the first team together. Germany got it spot on. They did it. Look at the success they got. Spain had it worked really well. They did the same, got the success. Whereas England, it's some players bypass the 21s, some players go to the first team, and then we're never going to play for the under-21s again. And it's a real problem. It's a real problem in my mind, because if you can be successful for the under-21s, and then you develop and go and play for the full squad, that means that you have had success in a major tournament for the under-21s where you've been away from home for a while. It creates that team spirit, and I think that's something that's missing badly from England.
So we saw a lot of kids get opportunities this weekend in the FA Cup. Is that going to have to be something we accept now, Danny, that says, okay, look, this is going to be one of these tournaments. It's going to become like the League Cup, where in a couple of years from now, it's going to be seen purely as a competition where young players get an opportunity. Managers don't take it serious, and maybe this is the only competition, along with the League Cup now, left for us to see young players. Is that something that is the trade-off where you're going to have to accept that?
I lost you then, Phil. Sorry, mate.
Sorry, mate. I apologize because I'm doing this in a hotel room, so the connection's probably crap. So I apologize to anyone watching this. Danny, in order to see young players today, we know the pressure that managers are under.
Yes.
And the average tenure of a Premier League manager is 18 months, so they don't want to play them. You know, Guardiola doesn't want to do it. Mourinho doesn't want to take unnecessary risks. And there's really high standards when it comes to attitude for these players. Are we going to have to accept, look, the FA Cup's going to become just like the League Cup, where this is a competition where we play our best young players? Is that the evolution of football now, where we just say, forget about what the FA Cup meant in the 80s? Because that's never coming back. It's now going to be a competition, just like the League Cup, that's purely for clubs, big clubs, to play young players.
No, I don't think so. I don't think it should be, because if you look at it, you know, Chelsea played a number of youngsters at the weekend. So, like I say, okay, Aki'd been on loan at Bournemouth, but they also had Loftus-Cheek, Chalobah, and players like that. But they were surrounded by experience. John Terry played. Fabregas played. Azpilicueta and Pedro played, who'd been playing in the Premier League. Begovic played. Willian played. So for me, it's not the issue of, okay, well, is this just going to be a tournament for youngsters? It's not that. It's getting that blend. It's getting that blend right. So I'll give you a prime example, right? Youngsters going to get their opportunity. Liverpool at the weekend played a few youngsters, okay? Randall, a very promising player at Liverpool. He played the first 45 minutes. Group of players that had not played many games, were probably a little bit lacking on confidence because they'd been in and out of the team, and other youngsters within that team. He was taken off after 45 minutes. What has that done for his confidence?
Yeah, I mean, this brings me back, Danny, to whenever Ferguson, during your time, refused to play kids in the FA Cup for fear that they would get beaten. And I remember something that he said specifically, where he said, look, I'm in the process of building careers, not destroying them. And if I put young players into, let's say United, in the FA Cup, when they went to the World Club Cup, if they'd have played in that third round and got a draw against Liverpool or Arsenal or whatever, and the youngsters took a hiding, it would have destroyed their confidence. Is that so? It backfires then?
Not necessarily. I remember I made my full debut for Manchester United in the League Cup and Aston Villa, and I think we got beat 2 or 3-0. We played a few youngsters, but there was still plenty of experience within the team. And I had to go off after 70 minutes. I didn't know what day it was. Dion Dublin all game, who is a friend and he's a fantastic character. And he gave me a game and a half, and we went up for a header in about the 65th, 70th minute, and he elbowed me right in the head. Accidentally, thought I was at home because I'd got concussion. I had to go back to the dressing room, and I was sat in the dressing room, didn't know what day it was, I had to come off substituted. That was a valuable lesson for me. When you're playing against these big players, these physical players, you have to protect yourself. So no, for me, although we lost, I think 2 or 3-0 in that game and I had to come off, it was a great learning curve for me. But the thing was, I was still surrounded by your likes of, I think, your Sheringham's, your Solskjaers, I think Bosnich was playing, and numerous other experienced players. So that was fine. But if you get 6, 7, 8 youngsters and then put a few senior players, I don't think that's right. I think you have to do it the other way around. I think you have to have your 7, 8 experienced players and then bring 3 youngsters into it. That's the way to do it. So it's not the amount of changes that you make. It's the balance between having youth and experience in there. So you look at Manchester United. Fosu Mensah played at the weekend, but he was surrounded. Schweinsteiger was there. Rooney was there. You had Smalling, Mkhitaryan, Rojo. So yes, he was a young player coming through, but he was in a team that was full of experience. The same with Chelsea as well. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying don't change the team. What I'm saying is, if you're going to bring youngsters into it, you have to surround them with players who have know-how, that players that have the experience. So if the going gets a little bit tough, they'll go, okay, listen, hold on, I'll help you through this.
All right, let me ask you.
That's the key to it.
Let me ask you about something, Danny. Chelsea have reportedly made a bid of 40 million for Moussa Dembele at Celtic.
Okay.
A kid that was available 6 months ago for free. Does that smack of desperation to you? 40 million quid.
Chelsea aren't in a desperation position, are they?
40 million for a lad that's had 6 decent months up in the Scottish Premier League, talented young kid that he is. First of all, I don't understand why you would leave this to the day before the deadline day. 40 million quid. If you're Celtic, surely you break Chelsea's arm for that. But what's your take on? I don't know how much you know about Dembele, but what's your take on that? Did I lose you, Danny? I think I lost Danny. I'll try to get him back here. Hold on. Danny, you there, mate? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me, mate?
Yes, mate, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Danny?